Today we're running through 5 tips and tricks for driving on the sand, whether that's a nice patch of sand dunes or just your local beach like where we are today or where we're about to be today. These tips are all geared towards beginners, so if that's you, you're watching the right video, and hopefully this video will inspire you to get out there, tackle those sand tracks and have a bit of an adventure.
Yeah, and that is exactly why I am here today also, because I am still in my beginner phase of forward driving, so we figured what better way than to bring an actual beginner along, because Daniel is a bit more of a veteran at this.
Wouldn't go that far.
But yeah, so also this video is kind of assuming that you've already got all the main gear like that you would need to come forward driving.
Yeah, so I will put together a separate video running through all the essentials you should always take on pretty much every forward driving trip, as well as a couple of nice to haves as well. So stay tuned for that if you're still in the learning phases and wondering what you should be taking on your forward driving expeditions.
Yeah, but otherwise, let's get straight into tip number 1.
Now, this is probably more important than all the rest of the tips combined, and I know you've heard it before, but drop your tire pressures. Drop them a lot, because honestly, the difference it makes is pretty insane. Me and Bianca have spent many a trip cruising along the beach nice and comfortably, only to see people either bogged or just digging up the beach because their tires are still full. The problem is that's going to be heating your engine up and also digging the tracks out for everyone else. And honestly, dropping your tire pressures is such an easy way to give you a pretty stress-free experience driving on the sand. To do so, I'm using some deflators that I've actually set to the exact PSI I'm wanting to drop my tires down to, but you don't need anything as fancy as this, even just like a pen lid or a stick that you can push the center of that valve stem in to let your tires down. That will get the job done, and I did that for a couple of years when I was first getting used to forward driving. Just make sure you've got some form of gauge to check your tire pressures once you've finished deflating them, and of course you've got a compressor to pump them back up again afterwards.
So if you're wondering why we bother dropping the tire pressure down before we go onto a beach, the point of it is basically to increase the amount of surface area that we can get the tire touching the ground. So when you deflate your tires, you're basically getting a longer section of your tire tread touching the ground at once, which is going to give us way more grip and allow us to float over some otherwise very boggy sand.
Yeah, exactly. So a way that I like to think about this, and it might seem a bit weird, but imagine those old school like snowshoes you see on movies. It just helps you distribute your whole body weight across a much larger surface area, and as Bianca said, just remain on that surface.
Yep. And if you're wondering what PSI we go down to, normally our deflators are set to 15 PSI, so that is usually what we're traveling at and what we're currently at right now. However, if the beach gets particularly boggy or it gets really bumpy, we can sometimes drop that to 12 or even 10 PSI, and we haven't had any issues.
I think we've been down to 8 before trying to get out of a really boggy situation down Yeagerut way down south. So there's no issues at all dropping tire pressures down that low. And I know a lot of people do get a bit apprehensive about dropping pressures down that low. The main reason for that is you can risk rolling your tire off the rim when you are that low. However, that's only going to happen if you're turning really vigorously, you know, doing donuts on the beach or driving around corners on firmer surfaces, whether that's rock or even bitumen, once you finish your day at the beach. So don't be too concerned dropping your tire pressures down low. It just makes things so much easier. Right now, this is a pretty boggy beach and we are cruising along like it's the bitumen road. Tip number 2 is to keep your revs a little bit higher on the beach than you would on typical bitumen roads. A good rule of thumb I find is to keep your car revving at around the point where you'd normally change gears on the streets. Of course, that's if you have a manual transmission like I do. Now that's obviously going to depend a little bit on your driving style, because if you normally redline every gear change, probably not that much, back off a little bit for that. The reason for that is you want to stay in the torquiest part of your power curve essentially for your car. Without getting too technical, if you look at a dyno chart, you can work out the exact RPM when your car has the most power. And a bit of a way of understanding this is if let's say you're driving down the country road, let's say you're driving down the back streets at 50 kilometers an hour and you chuck your car in 5th gear or 6th gear and you plant your foot, what's going to happen? Not much, right? You're not going to be increasing your speed very much at all.
And that's because your revs are going to be quite low in that gear range.
Exactly, whereas you do the same in 3rd gear when your revs are much higher and you're off.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to this is obviously, like what we've just said is kind of a blanket statement. You do adjust to what car you're in, what terrain you're driving on, and how you were driving, and it really is like a feel thing. So when I first started, it took me a little bit to learn to not, like, I just wanted to change gears because the revs are sitting at that little bit higher range and you feel like you're like, oh, like, do I need to slow down or do I need to change gear? But it just takes a little bit of a switch in your way of like kind of thinking, and you get used to it. And from then on, it's literally just feeling it. If I feel the car starting to bog down, I'll start to bring the revs up a little bit because you can kind of feel what power you've got at the pedal. But I definitely find it a lot easier in a manual because I can hold it in a gear. I haven't tried it in an auto.
That's a good point to mention, actually. So if you do have an automatic, which is probably, I'd say 90% of people nowadays, same principle still applies. I would suggest if you have the option to flip it across to Tiptronic, which allows you to select those gears manually, and that way you're going to keep it in a gear that gives you a little bit more in terms of revs. So we have just swapped drivers for tip number 3 because it's something that Bianca is still in the process of learning. Is that fair to say?
Definitely, very fair to say.
Yeah, so essentially this tip is to try not to fight the car too much when you're driving on rutted out sandy beaches. A good way of thinking about this if you're new to forward driving is your car's going to know the way to go and your job is to merely provide suggestions and a bit of guidance, but ultimately the car will find its way along the beach.
I like to think of it like I am just a passenger who doesn't know as much as the D-Max knows. The D-Max knows best and will tell me where we ultimately end up going. And as Daniel said, I am just here to tell it what I would like to do. Sometimes it will listen, sometimes it won't.
Yeah, so long as those ruts are going the direction you want to go, it's the best decision just to stick to them because that's going to be the most compacted sand. Those ruts have fallen from a lot of traffic driving down the same direction you're going. And it's also not going to work your engine too hard by trying to fight and go into the more boggy sand. So honestly, it's just a win all round.
So this one's more of a mental barrier rather than like something that's hard to do physically. It's more just about accepting that it's gonna feel weird, and that's been really hard for me. I've had to really learn to trust the process of like the car will keep going, and like ultimately you can always decide where it's going to go. I can rip the steering wheel left or right and I can put some gas on and we can go there, but it's all about understanding that you won't be able to steer it directly where you think you want to go because the wheels are just going to follow the ruts, and it can be really dangerous if you don't follow that.
Absolutely. So a bit of a horror story here that's not meant to scare you, it's just meant to show you what can happen if you try and fight those ruts to the extreme. So about 8 years ago on this exact stretch of beach between White Hills and Preston Beach down south in WA here, there was a four-wheel drive cruise, and on that cruise was a novice four-wheel driver doing all the right things, joining a cruise to try and learn, but there was one particular section of beach that was quite rutted out and it was quite cambered down towards the water with quite a steep sand embankment up on the coast side of that sand track. And as they're driving along, the person feels like their car's going towards the water, so they're doing the natural thing. They don't want the car in the water, so they're turning away from that. But what's happening? Nothing's happening. The car's in deep ruts. It's still driving the same direction it was before, so they keep turning that steering wheel, till eventually they're driving along forwards while their wheels are facing straight towards that steep sand embankment. Then for whatever reason, there might have been a slight bump in the sand, or maybe something their tires has gripped on. It sent them at cruising speed straight up that sand embankment and rolled their car on the beach. So that doesn't happen all the time, but it's an example of what can happen if things go really, really badly.
And I'm literally driving along listening to Daniel and just look down and my steering wheel is currently pointed to the left and we're going straight. So I'm literally doing a milder version of what he was just talking about, and that is exactly what I'm having to learn not to do.
Yeah.
But it's all about, like, right now I really want to send the wheels left, but keeping them straight is honestly the best thing I can do. So
we're not saying to let go of your steering wheel entirely, we're just saying try and not fight the car too much when you're driving through those rutted out situations. Okay, so tip number 4 is if you stop on the beach for whatever reason, Gaga, stop, quick, I'll pull the handbrake.
Whoops, sorry.
Good ABS. If you stop on the beach for whatever reason, maybe you're waiting for someone to attempt a difficult obstacle up ahead, maybe you're bogged, who knows, whatever reason you stop on the beach, a good thing just to get into the practice of is just reversing a little bit before you take off again. So right now, as we've stopped, essentially there's a mound of sand in front of our wheel that we're gonna now need to drive over. If we back up a little bit, just do a small bit of reversing, only a couple of meters, just enough to, essentially what we're trying to do is compact a bit of a runway. So when we take off again, we're driving on that nice compact sand before bouncing over that rut or that bump in the sand, and we're off again. Yeah, there you go. So obviously this beach isn't particularly boggy, so you wouldn't traditionally need to do it here, but it's something that I've done that many times that it's almost become a bit of muscle memory in a way now, that when I stop, just back up a little bit and then drive off again. Also very handy if you've just snatched someone out, because you'll find, like, this is getting a bit too advanced, I know, but if you just pull someone out of the bog, your car will burrow down, remove your recovery strap, reverse a little bit, and then drive off again. So
feel the car just go bloop.
Yeah, so Bianca's made us a bit of a mound. I won't actually, you talk, I'll film this.
All right, so Daniel's just filming. I'm gonna try and drive forward. I haven't reversed, we're in low range, so we'll try and get forwards. Alright, so very boggy, and now we're going to come to another stop. Alright, so I'm going to reverse slowly now without spinning the wheels, hopefully, to try and flatten off a bit of spot. And now I'm going to go forward. Oh, that was actually so much easier. And we're off. We'll leave Daniel there.
You just showed that perfectly.
I know, it did so good.
Yeah.
It actually made a big difference. I was surprised. I didn't think it would be that good.
So fitting way to end our tips. Tip number 5 is a way to pull your car up on the beach so you're not going to get stuck again when you go to leave. So we've just pulled up on the beach here, and the tip here is to try and pull your car up so that you're on an angle. Is that the way to describe it?
Yeah, basically you want your nose pointing a little downhill if possible.
Or the back of your car. Either way works really, just so when you go to leave, gravity's going to assist you in pulling off onto the beach.
Yep, so I drive along, I see a bit of a hill, and I'm going to reverse up, so I'm actually going to use a bit of a natural slope in the track, which is now I've got my back end down, which will give me a little run up, and now I'm going to blast the D-Max up a hill to park it nose down. So basically you are trying to park yourself on a bit of an incline some way, whether you are nose in and reversing back out onto the beach, or if you are like we are, which is currently reversed in, so that when we drive off, our nose is pointing down and gravity is going to assist us so that we don't get bogged.
Exactly, so you can use this either on a boggy beach where you're worried that like if you just pull up on the straight, you're going to get stuck by taking off again, or if you're just unsure and it's your first time at the beach, just do this to give yourself that peace of mind to know that after you've finished swimming in the water or having your lunch, you're still going to be able to drive off safely without getting stuck.
Yep, and the good thing about it is that most beaches have a bit of a natural incline anyway, because you're usually going down into the water. So as long as you're not parking like right on the water, you usually can find yourself a little bit of a hill to park yourself up.
Yeah.
So one little bonus tip I wanted to add in is if you feel your wheels spinning or starting to spin, don't just plant your foot on the accelerator. Let it off, back off on that accelerator, because otherwise all you're going to do is effectively dig yourself a massive hole, and you're going to spend hours digging your car out. When, in other words, if you're starting to get bogged and you feel it starting to dig down, and if you're putting your foot down and it digs down more, it's much better to just back right off and let it come to a stop and be mildly bogged than it is to try and plant it and end up digging yourself down to the chassis.
Absolutely correct. Like we've been in that situation many times where, you know, you're driving along, you feel the car starting to slow down, it's coming to a stop despite the fact your foot is still just in the same place it always was. It's always a better situation just to let yourself come to a stop, take your foot off the pedal, get out, let your tyres down, whack some recovery tracks in, do something so that it doesn't happen again, and then you're stuck for maybe 5 minutes instead of 5 hours like we've been a couple of times in the past.
Yep.
It's all from experience.
Yep. That brings us to the end of our tips for you guys. Hopefully that gives you the confidence to go out there and just have a go. And worst case scenario, you're gonna get bogged, but best case scenario, you're not.
And also, don't be worried about getting bogged, right?
Either way, you're gonna learn from it. And also, there is always gonna be someone out there. I mean, usually if you're starting out, it's better to go to like the more populated beaches, and trust me, everyone in this full drive community is more than happy to lend a helping hand. We've done it countless times, and we've been helped countless times.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's what goes around comes around in a way. Like I remember when I was first learning, I'd made some pretty rookie errors. People always helped me out, didn't make me feel stupid, and now as a flip side of the coin, we often help people out when we see them bogged on the beach or just struggling in general. So the four driving community, as Bianca mentioned, is really great. Give them a couple of ears if they help you out, and the community will continue to thrive.
Yeah, definitely. And just get out there, have a go, be willing to laugh at yourself and take it all in stride. You know, like don't expect to get it perfect. You're gonna get bogged, you're gonna find yourself in some hairy situations, but hopefully these tips will come back in somewhere in your distant mind or in the back of your head, and you'll be like, nope, that's right, yes, I've got something that might help.
I don't plant my foot when I'm getting bogged.
Or you'll do it and you'll be like, oh, that's what that tip meant.
Yeah, it might start all making sense.
Meanwhile,
nothing's going to teach you better than experience. So getting out there, having a go, not being too stressed, and just having fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So I will also mention that they were just 5 or 6 tips that came into our minds. There's thousands out there, and I'm sure you guys have your own as well. So please track them down in the comment section down below so we can all have a read. We can all learn from each other's knowledge, essentially.
Absolutely, yep. And maybe, you never know, we might do a follow-up video.
Your tips for driving.
Yeah, if there's more tips or something else that we think of, but for sure. Daniel came up to me and told me his idea, and I was like, oh, I have so many things that I've like learnt recently. Like, don't go too fast on the beach. If you see a bump, slow down.
Insert footage here. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Happy full driving.